What is going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Delicate Plan podcast. I am Primitive, and as always, I got my co-host with me, Dante. What's going on, man?
You know me, Prim. I'm all good. How you doing?
I am doing good. I have been playing probably way too much Yu-Gi-Oh than I should be, but that is for another day. Today, this week, we got some very big news to talk about. I'm sure some of our listeners probably already expected us to go over some of this, but before we get into that, I just want to say apologize about no episode the past couple weeks. Nationals happened the first week, so we already said we weren't going to do that week, and then last week we had a little bit of a scheduling issue, but we are back now. I had a couple people ask me where the podcast was or when the next episode was going to be. Podcast's not going anywhere. If we don't got an episode coming up, we're just something's just scheduling came up or something came up. So just gonna let you all guys know that now. But today, Dante, we are talking about something very important. Wouldn't you agree?
I do agree, 100%.
And I'm sure if you are wondering what we're talking about, we're talking about the announcement that at the upcoming DigiFest, they are going to be testing having a Mulligan as well as having a side deck in the Digimon card game at an official event. Actually, a couple official events. And so this is pretty big news because this is something that we've missed in the Digimon card game that a lot of other card games having. Some card games have Mulligans. We know Yu-Gi-Oh has their side deck, and a lot of other these cards have these other interactions like with the deck either at the beginning of the game or after the game. And Digimon's never really had that, but now we have the introduction of it being tested. Now they are being tested. It's not official yet, but it might be in the future. But mulligans and side decks are going to be completely different topics pretty much no matter what. So we'll go one by one. So we'll go in alphabetical order, which means we're talking about mulligans. And something that I've been aware to now, as of right before the podcast, is that me and Dante, when it comes to the topic that we're going to talk about today, are on complete opposite sides
Uh-huh.
the entire time. So this will be a very interesting one. So, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first about mulligans?
You know what? About mulligans, I think I'll take first.
All right.
So, mulligans, in my opinion, um, with how Digimon right now is structured between the OCG and the TCG, I do not think we need a mulligan. Now, hear me out. This is also with the introduction of side decking.
Mm-hmm.
So, having a mulligan, it just rewards you for playing a more high rolly deck.
Yeah.
And when it comes to that, when you mulligan, you're fixing RNG. So it's one of those things to where in the Digimon card game, RNG is 100% part of the game. It's just a factor between our security. We don't know what's in it.
A lot of the
Between
time, yeah.
right, right. I mean, of course, the obligatory, TK or looking into it and stuff like that.
Reinforce, yeah.
Right. Like we don't like when it comes to our draw, we don't know what our draw is.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get the properly search like how I know some TCGs like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh do. We don't
Mm-hmm.
get the search, so it's one of those things to where you giving us a mulligan, it help fix the RNG, which actually gives more high rolly decks such as Adjustment, such as a Little Flute. When it comes to those type of decks that want a high roll as often as possible, you're giving them more of a probability to actually do that. Now, when it comes to and we'll touch on it in a little bit, but when it comes to side decking, that can all be fixed and changed because of how somebody how somebody constructs their decks and whatnot. But that's a whole different subject. But when it comes to the mulligan aspect of it, it actually takes away. It actually doesn't punish people for not constructing their decks properly. It actually gives them an out at the beginning of the game. Say, oh, I drew all my fours. Let me put it at the bottom of my deck. Let me draw. Oh wait, here we go. Here's a three. Here's a three, four, five, six. This is my whole entire line. Instead of having to think your way out of a situation, like it actually, you know, bricking is part of the game. Because how the game is constructed, bricking is actually part of the game. You're going to brick whether you have a whole line or not, but that's the RNG factor of it. Now, if you take that away, you might as well add in something like proper searching when it comes to it. Because now you're like, okay, I know what cards at the bottom of my deck. So I'm in my head, I'm like, okay, it's one or two less of each and every last card. I can then adjust accordingly. So you're giving people a handicap. So I personally, I said it when our podcast prior, if they did it like Dragon Ball, that I might be okay with it. But just sitting back and reflecting, over the past month and a half, yeah, I don't agree with Mulligan whatsoever in this game. I feel like if you are just drawing bad, you just drawing bad. But in our TCG, we are best 2 out of 3. Now in the OCG, I can 100% see maybe they're doing a Mulligan because of their best of one. But here in the TCG, you have those 2 out of 3. Oh, you have those game threes, and look, if you draw bad, you draw bad. That's literally just the whole entire thing. That's how it is in the game. It's like, okay, I draw bad, I draw bad. I had to play my way out of it. I had to make lemonade out of lemons. And my thing is, I wanted to be a card game to where you can take your deck and construct it. And the one thing you have to say is, how bricky is this deck? How can I not brick? Now you're taking a potential aspect of deck building, which makes this game actually makes the game a very, very good, viable game. Is that there's so many cards that you can construct with that you have to then focus on the consistency aspect of it. Other than now, if somebody's playing some kind of level 4 security control deck or whatever it may be that we had back in BT3 or BT3 or BT4, then they're like, oh, okay, I drew all these cards, no threes. I'm gonna put those above me. Oh, now I'm break my hand. Like that's taking away a whole entire aspect of the game that a lot of people, when it comes to seeing how somebody actually can think their way out of a situation, you're taking that aspect out of it. And a lot of people now are just going like, well, okay, here's my line. This is where I go. Instead of, how can I think my way out of it with these 5 cards that I have in my hand? Okay, should I play more aggressive by dropping in level 4? Should I play more aggressive by dropping in level 5? Or okay, so I can digivolve into a 3 and raising. I can draw a card. Okay, I didn't draw 4. So am I going to drop a 5 and put my opponent at potentially 3 memory because I'm going first? Or those kind of aspects and those scenarios. So that's just why I don't think that having a mulligan is actually a good thing in this in particular type of game.
Okay. Well, there's one thing I kind of agree with you with, but then obviously I pretty much disagree with everything else. So, yes, the mulligan is going to help high rolly decks like Jessmon, but like if you have a deck that like the Jessmon that we have right now, before we go into BT7 and they get their new Huckmon and the Sistermons and stuff and it gets a little more consistent, if we have like the Jessmon right now where it bricks a lot, I've played against a lot of Jessmon decks, like a lot of Jessmon decks, and there's many a times where they do something like whiff a rookie in their top 5 and then they play like red memory boost to reveal the top 4 and then they still don't hit a rookie for like 2 turns. So even if they put their hand to the bottom, they still brick a lot of the times with stuff like that. So yes, it's going to help high rolly decks get their line or whatever, but I think mulliganing would be a skill, first of all, because you'd have to understand that most decks aren't going to get back to the cards that are at the bottom of their deck. So yeah, if you whiff a rookie and you're in a big like you're in a hard time, so you mulligan, but you have two Jessmons in your hand and you put them to the bottom. Well, now you get to draw them. You get to potentially hit a rookie, but now your two Jessmons are at the bottom of the deck, and there's a very high chance that unless you're playing something like Security Control, that you're not getting back to those cards because we don't have search. We just have off the top. So with mulliganing with Digimon is Digimon has a mechanic that is completely different than every, well, I guess not every other card game. I guess Pokemon's very similar, where you have your rookie, your level 3, and you're trying to go level 4, level 5, level 6, and that's how a lot of decks build. And I say Pokemon's kind of like that because you start with your basic and then your level 1 or whatever. And
Same with Vanguard.
Huh? Oh yeah, and
Vanguard.
Yeah. So a lot of those times, if you whiff those bottom ones, and your opponent doesn't, then you just have non-games, and non-games happen way too consistently in this card game to really. In my opinion, I think the card game should have came out with a mulligan because of this. Like, I've just witnessed, played against so many non-games. Like, it's not really that fun when your opponent has to like hard drop a level 5 3 turns in a row and never does anything, and then you just kind of just cream them because they didn't hit the level 3. They just had level 4s and level 5s and level 6s, and when they hard played the level 4, you were able to bounce it back, or when they went to a level, you just keep choking them, or you gave your opponent too much memory. All this stuff happens, and a lot of these non-games happen, and it's very annoying, and it's one of the things that I hear complained about the most is bricking. And when people say bricking, there's a lot of other terms that people say with bricking, but most of the time when people are talking about bricking, what they mean is that they needed one certain level, and they're probably playing a high level of that, or high number of that level of Digimon, so let's say level 5, but then they whiffed all their level 5s, and so even though they had a level 3 and a level 4, they went 5, 6, 7 cards deep into their deck and never hit a level 5. And so even though they had the level 6 and the level 3 and the level 4, they have what is effectively a non-game because you don't really have a way to get up to your level 6 as if you would. Like, technically you can hard play level 5, but then your opponent has like 5 to 8 memory to work with, and that usually with a lot of decks you can deal with that, especially in the current metagame. I could just like bond a friendship that and bottom deck it or whatever. And so because of the non-games that happen due to just like missing one specific level, I think a mulligan is borderline necessary. Now we're talking about with mulligan and sideboard. I don't think the mulligan and the sideboard really change that much. Honestly, the mulligan would make the sideboard even stronger than it already would be if we had a sideboard, because then you'd be able to just side in your 6 to 8 broken cards, and then you just get to mulligan until you draw it, and then you just have the cards in your hand. So mulligan and, I'll say this right now, mulligan and sideboard I don't think can coexist like very well together, because sideboarding is already going to be way too incredibly, would be like extremely broken, and being able to mulligan so you hit your sideboard cards like almost guaranteed is also like super broken. It's like if you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh and you side deck in like 7 hand traps, and then you hit none, and then you can mulligan and you draw like everything that you need. Like, that would be super broken because you get to enable your side deck. And so both of them together would be very bad. But as we'll get to with side deck later, I just don't think there should be a side deck at all. I would much prefer the mulligan, so that way, sure, the high rolly decks that are already going to be bricky even with the mulligan, like Jessmon, will have a higher chance of getting through, but just overall, the amount of non-games that would be gone by being able to mulligan would be so much. Instead of being like a decent amount of times where people are like, oh, I whiffed because I didn't hit a level 3 or something, or like I didn't hit my level 5, that would drop way more, and you'd have way more competitive games where people are actually like going deep and actually getting each other down in security, instead of just having games where it's just like, oh, game 3 I drew awful and my opponent, I just like non-gamed, and that's it, my opponent won. And bricking's going to be a thing, and drawing bad and RNG and all that stuff, that's going to be a thing in every card game, because the way your deck is shuffled is technically an RNG. So if your deck is not shuffled in a way that is favorable for you, that's technically an RNG. But if your deck is really bad, like if you open just like a hand that is like basically unplayable, and then your opponent opens just like even half decent, even like a half decent hand, like where it's like kind of bad, versus a hand that's just a complete brick, you're still very one-sided. And with Digimon, there's not like the craziest comeback potential in a lot of colors. Some colors have like comeback potential. Black a little bit more because they have like ultimate flare, Gewalt stuff like that. Blue, I guess, is also kind of nice because they have like ice wall. But a lot of decks don't have like these crazy like board clearing things where if you fall really far behind, you're gonna be able to wipe off 4 or 5 Digimon in like one single turn. And like I said, that's not going to be fun for anybody of any level in this game. And I don't think really like the like catering to make sure that high rolly decks like Jessamon don't get a mulligan isn't going to help that much, just because if we look at the most high rolly decks that we've had, at least from when I've played, I would say it's probably Lilith Loop and like back like early Lilith Loop, where it was just like you either drew the perfect cards and you won against anything, or you didn't and you lost against like everything. And then there's Jessamon right now where it feels very much the same. Those two decks, yes, would get a huge buff with the Mulligan, but I don't think they're really that common, and I don't think the Mulligan itself would spawn new archetypes that are just incredibly high rolly, because the decks that are that powerful when they're high roll are already decks that are built. So I don't think it would really change anything that much. I think it would just make the game way more competitive because there would more games would actually be played. And I also think that mulliganing, like I said, is going to be a skill, because you need to understand that majority of games, especially when we go into the next couple of metagames, like next metagame where it's going to be very aggressive with hybrids and stuff, when you put those cards at the bottom, you're probably not seeing those cards again. So you're essentially going to have to like use that knowledge that you just put these 5 cards to the bottom and you're probably not going to see them.
One thing I will agree with you on is I do agree that side decking and mulligan should probably not exist in the same game at the same time.
Yeah.
Now, my opinion is the side decking I would prefer over the mulligan, and you are vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what made this conversation interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I would say this: when it comes to, I know, and you brought it up, when it comes to the next format and how we're going to have hybrids and all these things popping up, if you open up with no tamers whatsoever, but you open up with 3s and 4s and with hybrids and stuff, if you mulligan and draw right into your hybrid, right into your tamers, right into more 3s, right into your fits in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
And already, I think the only deck that we really have when it comes to the only deck we have that manipulates the hand is Dan Devilmon. And like, just imagine if Dan Devilmon was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
My whole argument is, when it comes down to mulligan, you're holding the hand of some people, because some people would like. Just think about this, and I played Live Loop when in its first infancy, to where before we had all this crazy stuff coming out with Titamon and whatnot, and yeah, that was a high rolly deck. But imagine if Live Loop back then had a mulligan. We would have been able to see Live Loop just as fast and as aggressive as it was now. Because when we open up, we don't open up. If we open up not optimum, we have another chance to open up optimum. And when you open up optimum, that's where the problem's going to be, because of decks like Jessamon and Little Flute that just high rolls to oblivion. And I mean, yeah, there's some other decks that we haven't brought up yet, but it's one of the things to where, especially if especially you have a very controlling deck like come BT7, yellow's gonna be a super defensive controlling deck. And just imagine if that deck didn't open up optimally, and like, okay, I have a chance to actually be a little aggressive against this deck and not let them get their pieces. Oh wait, no, they mulligan, now they draw, then they fix their hand. Now I gotta deal with a grind fest of 35 minutes because this person keep on stacking up security, and now it's back. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not complaining about the back and forth. I'm complaining about giving certain decks and archetypes a advantage over others, because if you're a mid range deck, you don't really care too much. If you're a hyper aggressive deck like Jessamine, you care. If you're a hyper defensive deck like okay, let's bring up Zoe, the Zoe hybrid line, then you care because that mulligan can really help fix your hand. Now, I do think me and you played many TCGs. The one thing that I did like, I didn't like about Pokemon was that yes, it was best 2 out of 3, but you had to inherently dodge your matchups. There were certain cards you like, oh, if I could just have a side deck and side these in against this matchup, I have a chance. If I'm I'm just take, some older cards. If I'm a Volcanion Flareon deck and I'm going against a Blastoise Deluge deck, like I'm going to lose because the type matchup is not in my favor. But if I have a couple of cards that are generic that can put in that help me in this matchup, I'm then on an even playing field. That's why I prefer the side deck rather than the mulligan.
Right. Um, I mean, there's some other reasons why I would like the mulligan way over the side deck, but we'd have to kind of get into the side deck first. But one of the things I have to say about that is like, yes, in Pokemon, that sucks, and you have like you hit the matchup and you just lose, and that's just how it is. But that thing is that is Pokemon, and this is Digimon. And Digimon and Pokemon, the way you build decks and how the game interacts are not the same, and it's very different. It's not as one sided. There aren't like matchups that are like 85% plus favored in one matchup over the other, outside of it being like something like Bond of Friendship versus like a tier 11 deck, right? Or a deck where it's just like you like you're new to the game type of stuff. Like in that scenario, yeah, Bond probably has like a 90% win rate because it's like not just like a modified starter deck or something. But in Pokemon, that can happen just because of how effects go and how stuff it is. And there's other card games that do it like that. But in Digimon, you have access to way more cards. You don't have to have cards that are synergy lines. You don't need to play. You don't need to play Charmander so you can digivolve into Charmeleon so you can digivolve into Charizard. Any Digimon can digivolve on top of itself. All of them have different digivolve effects, on-play effects, inheritable effects, whatever. They have all these other effects that can interact, and you can pick and choose those and bring them out and all this stuff. And like, you don't have to play tribal, right? Like how a lot of other decks are, where you have to play the deck that you're playing. Like if you're playing a Yu-Gi-Oh deck, a lot of the times, if you're playing Phantom Knights, then you're playing a lot of cards that say Phantom Knight on them or in the text, or cards that base around Phantom Knight and stuff like that. As to where Digimon, when you're playing Agumon, yeah, if you're playing Agubond, then yeah, you're playing a lot of cards that are based around Agumon, but that's because they have strong synergies with each other. But when it comes to like digivolving, it doesn't have to be a Greymon, it doesn't have to be whatever. It can be, you can digivolve into Bauhuckmon and then digivolve that Bauhuckmon into Rise Greymon or whatever. And it's just like, it can be completely different. And so the way that the deck can be built can be changed in your main deck with the 50 cards to tech for certain matchups and make things like that. So where you're, like I said, unless you're playing like a deck that is not even like a real competitive deck and you're playing against tier 1 like highly optimal Bond of Friendship, then yeah, it's probably gonna be 90 plus. But for the most part, you're probably not gonna have a matchup. Like if you play 100 times, you're probably gonna win like at least 30 to 35 times out of those 100 if you're both at the same skill level. Even if you're playing like a tier 3 deck to the tier 1 deck, you're not gonna have that bad matchup. You're gonna have outs. And so I don't think the side deck is as important in Digimon as it is in other card games, because in other card games, because of the tribal nature of it, some decks just do get really hard countered by other decks or just have like abysmal matchups. As to where Digimon, you can just like you can main deck other cards that are for specific matchups that don't necessarily take away from other matchups, because you can just use them as like a ladder to digivolve. If you have a level 5 that's good versus one matchup but it's bad versus other matchups, well, then you just use that as a stepping stool to your level 6. Or if you have an option card, like for example in Bond, we teched in Rattlestar specifically for Diaboromon because Diaboromon was kind of a bad matchup, And so we're like, okay, we're gonna use Rattlestar. It's gonna be better than Kakaitis Breath. So when we hit that slot, Rattlestar will be more effective. And it made that matchup a lot better. And it did hurt some other matchups because we weren't able to bounce things unless, like, there's a lot of things we couldn't bounce unless they had 3 or more Digimon. And so it kind of took away from that matchup, but not really. But it like enhanced the matchup. And so you can do that with Tex in Digimon just because of the diversity of it, whether it's inheritable or if it's a on deletion effect, or if you're there's even people playing other option cards. There's people playing blue in Three Musketeers, so that way they can deal with things like Craniumon better. Or there's people playing like Purple Mimi in Gabu Bond was a thing a lot because you would be able to just gain a bunch of memory and stuff like that. And so in Digimon, you have a lot more freedom for tech cards that help in bad matchups that don't necessarily take away from good matchups, to where I don't think the sideboard is needed as much in like other card games where you have like incredibly polarizing matchups.
Now, I will say this. When it comes to, and I just touched on what you said about the whole Yu-Gi-Oh thing. You could theoretically splash Phantom Knights, and they would synergize with themselves in any other deck. So you can have 2 different decks within one. They just work with each other.
Oh,
you have to find a common synergy.
We're gonna get to that. I have things to say about that in Digimon.
Now, yeah. Oh, I mean, you want to go into the sideboard? We can definitely do that right now.
I mean, you can say whatever you're going to say. I'm just talking about the topic of taking an archetype and sideboarding it into anything. I want to mention that when we start talking about sideboards. That's a topic I want to bring up. Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, no. You're good. You're good. Yeah, no. Me personally, I just don't think the game needs a mulligan. That's just me personally. I don't think the game needs it. I know a lot of people ask for it. You know, a lot of people are clamoring for it. Just me personally.
No, and I mean the thing is we're not here to convince each other either.
Yeah, no, not at all. And this is a discussion that a lot of people have. Some people don't think the mulligan is necessary. Some people think it is.
Mm-hmm.
We're really just covering all the bases. This is how we actually feel, and this is our opinion.
I mean, as far as the podcast goes, us having different opinions is probably better for the content. Just because if we both agreed, we'd be able to talk about it. But I mean, honestly, when Ramiro told me that you had differing opinions, I was like, interesting. I am interested to hear. So I think it works out that way. But yeah, I think this is discussion, because the thing is it's like we're not here to convince anybody, not you, not anybody like listening. It's just I have my thoughts. Dante has his thoughts. We've both spent plenty of time thinking about it, so there's probably not that we might bring up some other points for everybody to think about that you haven't already, but it's mostly about just like you can see both sides, and then ultimately it's going to come down to whatever Bandai chooses anyway,
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. That's what this is.
Exactly.
We just have opinions. Like, we're just putting it out there. If you agree, disagree, think you're in the middle, neutral, it is what it is.
I mean, here's the thing. If anybody listening disagrees, they still agree 50% of the time.
Correct. Now, sideboards. So, sideboard, side deck, whatever you want to call it sideboards and Magic, but yeah. But you are on the opposite side of this issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to hear your thought process about not having side decking and Digimon.
Gotcha. Okay. So I already touched on one part of it, right? Is that side decking and mulligans I don't think can coexist with each other. I think it's and for the main reason why I will talk about with the first reason why I think sideboarding is really bad. Well, I guess I won't say it's really bad. I say it's bad. When I say it's really bad, I mean it's bad for the card game. Sideboarding itself is unbelievably overpowered in this game. But let's take a current example from the current format right now, right? Bond of Friendship. Okay, I took it to nationals. I played it a bunch, so I played it like a ridiculous amount. I am very aware of the good matchups and like the bad matchups, and all the stuff like that, right? So I will say the two matchups that are probably the worst were Diaboromon and Security Control. I would say I would also throw Agubond in there, but not to the same degree where it was like with Security Control and Diaboromon. Sometimes the board state can just be unplayable, where you just lose because you just don't have the cards to do anything. As to where Agubond is just you just lose because you get outpaced. So it's a little bit different. So I'm just gonna talk about Diaboromon and Security Control. So Diaboromon Security Control with Gabubond, they were pretty bad matchups, but for the most part, I felt very confident versus like everything else. So if I had a sideboard going into nationals, I would have sided in probably 3 Rattlestars in my side deck, 2 Magnadramons, 1 Sorajo, 4th Lobo, 4th Kendo, so that's 8, and then I'd probably save. I don't know what the other 2 would be. I'll just go with those 8 right there, okay? And then when I play against Diaboromon, I'm just gonna side out the bad cards versus Diaboromon and side in, so I have 4 Rattlestars. So with how much draw and consistency is Gabubond, instead of having 1 Rattlestar, now I'm gonna have 4 Rattlestars. And whenever you play down your Diaboromon blocker, it's going to the bottom of the deck almost every single time, and usually that, like, because you could still have other removal, you can still have Kakaitis, so there's a strong chance that once that hits the board, it's gone. And if it doesn't one turn, you'll probably find it very quickly once you start drawing with Matt and Upamon and Drabu. Like, there's so much draw in the deck that when you have a 4 of something, you see it a lot. And so even having a 3 of some things in Gabubond, I found, is almost sometimes too much, because you draw so much that you see the card more than you need. So if you put 4 Rattlestar in there, you're probably going to hit it, and you're probably going to Rattlestar it, and then they're not going to have blocker, and then once you play another one, you're probably going to Rattlestar it again. Because like I said, when you're playing a 4 of, you're more than likely going to draw multiple of them, plus you have a high chance of them being in your security, so that when they do attack, you can just bottom deck it, right? And I'm sure there's probably other cards that you could tech for that and stuff without having actually tested with a sideboard. I haven't really fully thought about a full Bond sideboard, but this is just from what I know, that having 1 Rattlestar was very potent in the Diaboromon matchup, and having 4 and upping the consistency would be very high. And then the Security Control matchup, I already know that I'd want to put in 2 Magnadramons, a Sorajo, and then 2 more hybrids, and I would feel... and then I'll probably put in 2 Absolute Blasts as well. And then you could just side that in, and you'd put in the Absolute Blasts. Actually, yeah, no, take out the Sorajo, and then just the last 3 slots are all Absolute Blasts. And then versus that matchup, you can side in the 3 Absolute Blasts and the 2 hybrids. And then you just, versus Security Control, whenever they play something, you just keep like bottom decking their stuff until you build up your hybrids. And then you can just go in with Bond Hybrid, which is very effective. One of the reasons that versus Security Control that you can have a lot of problems is because I didn't like Absolute Blast and versus like every other matchup, so you don't play Absolute Blast, so you have to bounce things back to their hand, which means they can play it again, which makes things like Serafimon and Sakuyamon a lot stronger. But if you can bottom deck them, then it's a lot easier to get rid of the removal. When you play Magnadramon, if they play things like Serafimon to swing 2 checks, or if there's some reason playing like Ty and Matt with Zwart and swing 2 checks, or they just start to get too aggressive, you can fill back up and you give them a bunch of memory. But a lot of times that doesn't really matter, because the cards that they play are so heavy that you're just recovering 2, stabilizing again, going like that. And then if you have the extra hybrids in your deck, that means you can afford to have more hybrids in your security, and you can also afford to have more hybrids to Digivolve on top of in the early game. So all of that stuff would not necessarily make you, like, I won't say it make you favored versus Security Control, I guess, but it ups your chances of being able to hit your win combo with a lot less, like, struggle, because especially versus Security Control, you're going to get through all your deck, so you're going to see all the side cards that you're going to put in, and so it's going to make your deck a little bit a lot stronger versus that. And so now you have this Bond deck that has like a good matchup versus like everything pretty much, or most decks. And then you're giving it the ability to side in versus its bad matchups, which also means that there's some cards in your main deck that you can, that like me and Chris would have played, that we wouldn't have played at all, because we could have just been able to make a side deck that would have been more impactful than having certain tech cards in the main deck. And then that main deck could have just been overall powerful cards that were just like different stuff. So the main deck would overall get more powerful, and you'd give it the ability to side deck into its bad matchups. And so now you're having this tier 1 deck that doesn't really have a lot of bad matchups, and its bad matchups are very close in win percentage between the two decks, and you're able to tech versus them. So now Bond is going to be very strong. So that's kind of the one thing I want to hit on. But before I give it over to you, I got to hit on another part of it. So that's with the good decks getting better, right? But then let's go to another deck like I guess like Diaboromon or like Rookie Rush, right? Those type of decks a lot of the time aren't going to benefit very much from a side deck. There are like they wouldn't be able to benefit nearly as much as something like Bond of Friendship would be able to benefit from it, because it has less bad matchups, or Bond of Friendship has like less bad matchups, so it's the side deck is going to be more potent, as to where something like Rookie Rush or Diaboromon can lose to a lot of different things, and you kind of have these core cards that you need in your main deck, so your main deck's not that flexible. And then your side deck is also going to be very hard to build, because you're going to have a lot of cards that you would want to tech around, because you have a lot of different matchups that you could lose to. And so like your side deck's just not going to be as powerful, because it's more spread out versus different things, unless you're just conceding to other matchups and not siding versus them. And then like Rookie Rush, for example, it's going to have like a whole ton of bad matchups in this format right now, and there's like, even if you side in some cards with Rookie Rush, there's not a lot of cards to even side in, because of just the way the deck plays. You kind of do the same thing with Diaboromon. You also kind of just do the same thing. You want to get Diaboromon tokens. You want to play like Diaboromons with Rookie Rush. You just want to play Rookies and Rush. And so it's like you're going to be able to tech in some cards that would help you versus like Mechanorimon and stuff, because people would definitely put a lot of people would probably just put Mechanorimon in their sideboard for aggressive decks. And so you could sideboard in stuff like Ogremons or something else like to go along your spirals to get on top of that. But for the most part, you're not adding anything that's like super like matchup shifting, I guess, in those type of decks. As to where if you go to the higher decks, the higher tier decks that have less bad matchups, those are very impactful, because you're able to side in like 3 to 6 cards for your like per 2 bad matchups that are going to help you. And especially when you have decks that are super consistent in drawing, like things like Purple or like Bond of Friendship, where they just have insane draw power. Well, then when they side deck, they're more than likely going to hit their side decks every single time, and then that's going to impact the matchup because they're bad matchups. You know what I'm saying? And so I guess that's kind of what I'm saying. I guess I'm trying to say, like, with a side deck, the best decks get way better, and the worst decks get essentially worse, because they're not getting as big as a boost as the top decks are.
Okay. I'm just start off with this. I think with the best that's getting better and the worst that's just getting good, I think that's Bandai's construction methods. Now we've seen a lot of cards that is anti Rookie Rush. Why? Because Rookie Rush is a player made deck. Most TCGs do not like player made decks, i.e., if you play Yu Gi Oh!, look at Dino Rabbit. They murdered Dino Rabbit. Like, period, point blank simple. They just killed the deck off. Now, my thing is, yeah, Rookie Rush is one of them decks that, players may, hey, we can just rush with all rookies. But that's the play style. And that play style is always countered. And yes, a side deck would not help that deck, but that is one instance out of the vast majority of decks that we have out there and are coming out. Now, I do agree with you that whatever, generic support that you would get or give to, in this case, it'd be a game mechanic that you would give to the lower decks to help them out, and if the top decks can actually exploit it, it's only the best decks getting better and the good decks getting better slightly. But I will say this, when it comes to how play styles are, it all depends on, like you said, the matchup. But at the same time, the sideboard is also a skill-based thing. If you, if your worst matchup is a rookie rush style type of deck. Or you know how Bond plays a lot of level threes on board, and you're like, well, I need to get rid of those level threes, and I'm playing red. Well, in your sideboard, win or lose, guess what? You have a nice counter in Volcanodramon that as soon as you draw it and they start popping, Gobblemons on the board, you hit the board, you wipe it. But then the memory system is how we check and balance it. Because the memory system now pushes them all the way over to, you know, 8, 9, 10 memory to where they can reestablish the board. So it's not like it's an absolute game ender. A lot of cards that, take for example, how you were saying, if you had a side deck, you most likely 100% would put Rattlestar in the side deck or the Deoboromon matchup and possibly for the security control matchup.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be something that it helps cover your weaknesses. But at the same time, RNG plays a factor because you got to draw it. And then you have to draw the right setup to not actually get overwhelmed. Because though that card may be good in that matchup, it could also be, not a great comeback card for you, depending on the matchup, or depending on how severe you fall behind in that matchup. So there's a lot of give and go that comes to the side decking. Now, I am in favor of the side decking because it gives things, like I said, Volcandramon, you can, hey, I'm going to put it in the side deck just in case. Or it gives some of these option cards like, oh, that's good. But like, for example, when it comes to Three Musketeers. There's some option cards that are like, I want to play that. Okay, so just because I come across this particular matchup that might not be good for me, I could then side out I can side out this Trump sword that's not going to work because they play 2, 3 Digimon per turn. So I'm going to go ahead and side that out, bring in something like another Ultimate Flare, or bring in something like another Iron Fist, or something to that extent.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps cover your weaknesses, which you still have to draw it. You still have to use it properly. Like me and you are pretty knowledgeable on how we play this game and how this game is played.
Mm-hmm.
But 90% of the base just want to play it for fun and I don't think like the mindset that we do on a competitive level half the time. So a lot of people just playing just to play. The sideboard is like, oh, I can only play 50 cards, but I can put this card I think is really really cool in my side deck, and then if it does come up, I can try it. Like this, that's how it's gonna be for on a local scene. Now for the competitive scene, I mean, most competitive players want it because they're like, I want a potential out to a very devastating matchup. Now, granted, yes, if Gobblebon had 4 Rattling Stars in the side deck, it would be a lot easier to go up against a security control or a Deoboromon deck. But at the same time, you have to side in. You have to side appropriately because if you side out the wrong cards, you can actually decrease the chances of you seeing that card or drawing higher chance of actually drawing bricks.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's more, yeah, it's more RNG that plays a factor into it, but it brings more of the skill and the is a skill and a mindset of an actual competitive player into the limelight instead of, oh, this archetype is way more powerful than this archetype, and this archetype is way more powerful than these archetypes, but not this one in particular. So it's going to be a harder matchup here. And like sideboards, like in my opinion, it doesn't make, like, if the tier 1 decks are, at level 8, and you can say the next 5 are like level 6, it doesn't make those next 5 come to a 7 and the tier 1 decks go to a 10. It actually brings the tier 1 decks up to a 9, but it brings those decks that's down here that needs a little more consistency, a little more threat. It actually brings them a little bit closer to that meta status because you can then say, oh, here's the meta decks. Let me play Rogue. Let me play that next 5 top decks. Let me go ahead and surprise some people. Let me throw these into the sideboard. Oh, okay. This is the perfect matchup. Let me side these in, and then these are not going to work in this matchup. Side those out. It it brings a whole different dimension to the Digimon card game that on a competitive level is going to be highly welcomed. You might get some people moaning and groaning on a local level because, oh, well, it's not enough time for us to do best 2 out of 3 and with sideboarding. I get that. If we sideboard, we might have to increase it by like another 5 minutes for our best 2 out of 3. But that's just me personally.
Oh my
But
god, I didn't even think about the timer.
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
no, dude. You just okay, you just convinced me even more.
And I'm just being straight honest.
I just
Like
thought
I'm
about
being
the
straight
time. Oh
honest.
my god, dude. Citing both after game 1 and game 2 is going to be like 6 7. That could be like 6 minutes with shuffling.
Yeah, so I'm being straight honest.
Oh my.
I'm just putting it all out there on the table.
Yeah, if
Yeah, I
they
know
don't
some.
okay, here's the thing. If they don't increase round timer by another like 5 at least 5 minutes,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have then
and
add that to my list of anti sideboard reasoning.
it's funny because like if that was like one of your big like points, I would actually agree with that aspect. Like they're gonna need to increase the time by five
I didn't even
minutes
think about
at
that. I'm gonna
least.
be honest. That never even came up once. Cause here's the problem with that. Okay, so I played the Pokemon VGC super hard, right?
Yeah,
And there is a tactic that was used a lot. The most notable, I guess, person that the listeners might know would probably be Wolf Glick, the 2016 world champion, 3-time national champion, etc. He was very open about the fact that he would do this, where going in, prepping in for worlds and stuff, he would make sure his Pokemon, he would like breed for the shiny Pokemon, and he would have like all these different
all
like
to eat up the
time
clock.
time sinks, right? Random time
Yeah,
sinks, and then that would give him the ability to, if it gets down to it, you'd be able to slow play very hard. You'd be able to use these timer stalls plus the slow playing on your decision making plus all the other natural animations from your opponent's side of the board and stuff like that. That would cause for a lot of time to be sunk down to where you'd hit the timer, and then you would put yourself in a favorable position to where you win. Now it's a little bit different in Digimon because a lot of the times it's gonna tie you if you go into that situation, because it's not like who has most security on the board or whatever.
right.
But the same thing still applies. If you're in a bad position and you know that, you can use these time sinks to your full advantage. So if there's gonna be a sideboard, one, there has to be an extension on the timer, on the round timer, and two, there has to be a maximum time for sighting and shuffling before getting into the next game. I don't know if there is. I had the let me pull. I have the document pulled up. Let me see if it says
Okay.
anything about time.
I know in Yu-Gi-Oh, it's a 3 minute maximum to side shuffle and present. So
Cause
that's how they did with that.
okay, as far as I see on um, as far as I can tell on this document sheet, unless I'm seeing anywhere, there is no official announced time on that aspect. That might change. That might be something that's added in the future. But as far as I can tell right now, there is no time. So if there isn't that, somebody could take the real time. Somebody could really just, oops, I kind of forgot what these cards in my side deck do. I should read them all really quick before I choose what to side. Uh-oh, did I just burn 7 minutes and now we're guaranteed to tie when I know that I'm in a losing matchup, and so instead of taking the loss and now I'm going to tie? Uh-oh. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That is a
Yeah.
problem. That's not necessarily, I mean, that's not a side decking problem. My biggest problem with deck decking is mostly being able to add 10 busted cards into your deck. But
And
the time sync concept of it is, I didn't think about it, but now thinking about that is genuinely an issue, because there are already a lot of matches that go to time.
yeah, I agree with that. Like, if you're playing against anything security control based or anything, I mean, yeah, like if for example, like on your channel when it was in the store tournament, me and John was going back and forth. Game one took 35 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm not going to stall you out, brother. I was like, we're going to play game two as optimal, as fast as possible. And that's why we got the game two so fast.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things to where, yeah, as a control deck, yeah, like they have to do something. They like, and that's an easy fix at capping how much time it is put into the side deck. And like, hey, you can't be siding more than like 2.5 minutes, or you
Exactly.
can get called on it for slow playing. And as a judge, yeah, like you're gonna 100% yo, you can't do that. You can't do that. Next time you're going to get a game loss.
Yeah.
Like that's very simple to fix. But
I think
I
it's
do
simple.
agree that
Okay, I think that's simple to fix in. Sorry to interrupt you, but I
yeah,
think that's a lot more simple to fix in person than it is online. Because calling a judge
yes.
online is going to more often than not take more time to get the judge to the table to make a call than it would take in person. And since there's the time between the judge getting there, they're probably not going to give you a time extension for giving a warning to somebody doing that, unless that's part of the thing where if somebody's caught slow sighting or whatever, then there is a time extension, something like that. That itself, like online, like basically what I'm saying is that makes more sense in person.
Right, and by the way Bandai's going, they want more in person tournaments. I
Mm-hmm.
think they figure out that the online thing can be used in a just case scenario type of thing, but they're pushing straight online. Like this is why they have it, and I think the first fest was in Austin, Texas, right?
Yeah,
So
it's in Texas. I don't know if it's Austin. I don't remember exactly.
okay, so like it's in Texas. They're trying to push online. No, they're trying to push in person. They're like, forget all this. We're just gonna, do what normal TCGs are supposed to do. That way, if there's anything going there, the head judge there can make the final ruling, final say so, yada yada yada, and then we can see how it goes. If it goes perfect or people like it, the feedback was great, we'll adopt that, and then we'll move forward with that. Yeah, I think it's something that they're really like of course they testing everything, this is their first in person tournament they're going to have, and like I think since the beginning of the game inception, there was
Wait,
born.
they've had a few in person events.
Okay,
I,
okay,
I
so
went to
yeah,
Gen Con myself in
there you
Indianapolis.
go, that's what I was forgetting. Yeah,
Yeah, and then there
I
was
was like,
the I guess I think it was a PPG event. I don't think that was an official event. So I don't know
right,
exactly how many online events or official events they have, but they have done at least Gen Con.
okay, and yeah, I think they're aware of this, and I know they're going to change accordingly after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
But I still don't think that well, that is a slight towards side decking, but that's more of a procedure type of thing
That's more almost like
when it comes to the judges.
a moral problem. Like I
Yeah,
don't know if
yeah,
moral is the correct word, but you know what I'm
I know
saying.
I know what you're saying.
It
It's
comes
almost
down
like,
to
well,
it's
yeah,
something. It is adding something into the game that is unless there are rules implemented into it, and honestly, they have to be kind of
somebody
strict
gonna
as far
exploit
as
it.
time goes. Unless those are enforced very hard, then it gives players who are willing to exploit it something to exploit.
Yeah, yeah.
And the
It's one
thing
of those
is
things to
taking a
where
tie. The difference between taking a tie and taking a loss, in a lot of tournaments, especially in tournaments where they end after there's just one defeated left, is very huge. Because if you have a tie, you get a
Mhm.
point. If you lose, you don't get a
Yeah,
point. So if you end up,
correct.
if you end up XO1, you're probably going to be at a way higher position than you would have been if you ended up at X1. You know, so
Oh yeah, correct.
yeah.
Yeah, like that 100%. Like yeah, yeah, it's crazy because I think a lot of TCGs are going to this whole yeah you can tie type of scenario, because even the anti-tie game called Yu-Gi-Oh, even they
Oh my
acknowledge
gosh.
that okay, yeah, now we have to go tie, okay, hold on, based off of life points, y'all even life points, it's a tie.
Mm-hmm.
Like even they acknowledge that ties are going to exist in the TCG. Now how you get there is a whole different animal. I don't think sideboarding will do it. I think it's something they have to take in consideration when it comes to how much time it is at a best 2 out of 3. I don't think they should go to a best of one because then high rolling decks just run the meta, aggressive decks just run the meta. But yeah, I really do think that sideboarding is I think it's more of a skill aspect that you put it into the game. And like you have to be able to know how to side in, side. And then on top of that, the whole entire thing of, okay, if my opponent is going to expect me to side this in, I have to I have to put these cards on my side deck just in case for this in particular matchup, because I know my opponent's going to play these cards, side them in. I need to put these cards in to make sure that I am ready for that in particular line, that in particular combo, that kind of stuff. So it brings a lot of like it makes the ceiling of Digimon higher by keeping the floor of it the same. And that's why I actually agree with the side deck.
Okay, I have two things we gotta talk about because I forgot to bring up the adding archetypes into anything type of side decking thing that we were gonna talk about, but also I'm just gonna say it like this because how I guess I view the sideboarding, I haven't said it how like I'm about to say it. Okay, so the main reason I don't like sideboarding, because I agree with you, it is very skill intensive. Side decking in Yu-Gi-Oh is gonna probably take me a while to figure out because getting back into it, I don't really know a bunch about the other archetypes, so I don't fully know what's gonna be there. So sideboarding is gonna be very skill intensive because one, you need to know what cards to put into your side deck. Then you need to know what cards to take out and what cards to put in for each matchup. Like what are going to be most
There's over
important
10,000 cards in Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah, and so it's there's I agree with you that's very skill intensive, but the reason, I guess the main reason that I really don't like side decks is if we go back to where I said I think the best decks get very good and the worst decks get better, if you will. Going back to there, I feel like it goes from you have a game right now where decks that are not 100% completely meta can become meta by having one or two good matchups, depending on, like, no matter how many bad matchups it may have. So to give an example, I'll say Diaboromon because I think that's a relevant one right now. So Diaboromon wasn't that relevant for a while, but the thing is Diaboromon is both very good versus the bond if you get the blocker stuff up, and it's also very good versus security control because a lot of the times they're not able to really, because they can't ultimate flare your tokens, they can't go Shawarma your tokens. A lot of times they can't really just get rid of your tokens, so you just summon a bunch of tokens and then you just swarm the board and win because they can't really delete them like they would with a lot of other boards. And so I'm sure it has a lot of other good matchups or whatever, but it has a lot more bad matchups than it does decks like, let's say, Lilith Loop or Bond, right? Or even Security Control. But it has a good matchup versus Bond and has a good matchup versus Security Control. And by it having that matchup and it being a huge commitment for those decks to have a good matchup versus Diaboromon, like for Bond, like I said, you'd have to commit probably like multiple Rattlestars and removal and stuff like that. And even consider like playing like Mechanorimon and stuff. Those will give you advantages, but they're very high commitment to put into your main deck. And so those Diaboromon's going to exist and do really well in the meta because it has a very high chance of hitting one of its good matchups because Security Control and Bond were so prevalent, right? And so Diaboromon's going to do very good. But if you give Bond and Security Control the ability to start side decking versus Diaboromon and giving it cards that are... Because the thing is, versus Diaboromon, I played it enough to where if they don't hit errata, they really don't have a chance at all. And then if they don't get a lot of tokens with the blocker Diaboromon, then they'll usually have to end up blocking once you start going in with hybrids and stuff. And you'll be able to clear off the board. But if they start to get going really hard, then there can be a lot of problem unless you're able to get rid of the blocker Diaboromon, which is where Rattlestar comes in very handy. And so like putting in these Rattlestars is like genuinely so impactful in that matchup, and so much so that I think with the draw power that you get from Bond with Upamon and Mats and Digivolving and just whatever, right? Drabu, you get a lot of, so you're gonna hit them. And really, versus like that matchup, you only really need one one of the cards that you sided in of the four to really for it to make that difference. And versus like with like security control, we were testing the Beelstar package, and having the Beelstar package and security control was very powerful versus Diaboromon because you can happy bullet showering away their tokens. And so this kind of goes into the other thing I was going to talk about. With security control, you could just run security control, and then you could side in the entire Beelstar package if you wanted to, and have a better matchup versus multiple matchups just by siding in 4 Beelstar and like 6 7-drop options, or just a few 7-drop options. Like you could literally just put in like 4 of them. There's a lot of decks that just run the 3-4 Beelstar and then like 3 or 4 7-drop option cards, just because being able to recycle that one option card is impactful enough in specific matchups to where it's just strong. So in the Diaboromon matchup, for example, you could side in the Happy Bullet Showering and be able to play it multiple times versus the Diaboromon tokens. And this is where I get to like the strong decks, I feel like, because obviously Diaboromon could side deck other stuff in to these other matchups, and it will help the matchup into their side deck. I'm not saying that it's just like only one deck gets the side deck and Diaboromon just cries. They'll definitely side deck stuff in. I don't know exactly what it would be, but majority of the time, these stronger decks, their side deck is going to be a bigger buff than the Diaboromon side deck's going to be, and that would make it to a, and I mean, this is theoretical, but I feel like that would make it to a point to where the win percentage on the like Diaboromon versus those other matchups would start to shift to Diaboromon's win percentage going lower, which would make Diaboromon less popular, and then it would kind of go from a deck that right now has a lot of popularity because it's 2 of the main decks are its very good matchups, to it going very far down in obscurity because its good matchups are starting to get better versus it, and then it has other bad matchups that it has to worry about. And so it's like the good decks get really, really good, and the not as meta, like the not top, and by good decks, I'll just say the top 5 decks. The top 5 decks get really good, and all the other decks get better, but the difference between how good each deck is such a big gap that I feel like the top decks getting better and the other decks just getting good is going to make it to where you get to a point where on a competitive level, you're going to go from going to a tournament where you could play against so many different decks each round. People could be playing Machinedramon, people could be playing Green, people could be playing Bond, people could be playing Jessamon, Agumon, whatever. You could have all these things, but with the side deck, if it gets to that point where the best decks just start to get better because they can side deck for their bad stuff and still have a very good matchup versus everything else, then it's just going to push all these other decks that are in the metagame because they have some stuff that's good versus these main decks. It's going to push them out of the metagame, and we're going to go from having like 12 different archetypes that are in tournaments to like 5 or less, and you're just going to be playing against like the same stuff all the time. And especially when we're going to get the Mulligan with the hybrid meta, I think that's going to get or the side deck in the Mulligan we're going to have, that's BT7. Yeah, it is BT7. So we're going to have BT7, which I already think is going to be a metagame that is potentially more stale because it's going to have a lot of hybrid. And just like each deck is going to be a lot of hybrids. We're going to take a deck that isn't going to have as many archetypes and then make it to where the better ones can potentially just push out the other ones, so where you have even less archetypes and more polarizing, like one deck's very good and stuff like that. And I guess that's like the main reason why I'm against side decking, because I feel like it makes it go from middle to low tier decks having a genuine chance of winning like versus any matchup that they play, because they have good matchup versus the main decks, to where just like they just don't, because they might have a good matchup versus game 1 and game 2, but they probably have a bad matchup game 2 and game 3.
Yeah, I still okay. Yeah, that's a lot to take in. So
no, you're good. I just had to say it. If we're gonna say it, I gotta put it out how I have internalized it in my head. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, you're perfectly fine. Now, I will say this, because I think we touched on this going right before the podcast. So you think it's very stale because everything's going to be hybrid focused. If it's not X antibody, it's hybrid. I think it's going to balance everything, but you're going to see more diversity when it comes to the colors. Now everybody's going to be like, oh yeah, everybody's going to be running blue because blue or everybody's going to be running red. It's like green hybrid's a thing, blue hybrid's a thing, yellow hybrid's a thing. Of course, black X antibodies a thing. Love loop, just it gets nerfed, but you can still loop, or you can go Titamon OTK. Like, it honestly feels like now that everything is going to be shifted and everything is like, hey, here's a line that's more optimal. Every deck can pretty much play the more optimal line. That balance things out. Now, I didn't think it's going to come down to card pool, which who has the deeper card pool, who has the more versatile card pool, which blue is insanely deep and versatile, and the skill. Because if you give a high end, like if you get Gabu Bond to somebody like you would know how to play it pretty optimally. You gave it to me, I don't know what I'm doing. And even then there's certain lines that you would see that I wouldn't see. And it's the same thing that goes with Live Loop. Like I see certain lines to where I know how to exploit it. And you might not even see it at all. Like I don't know what exactly am I supposed to do. Am I supposed to just go up into live mon, or am I supposed to do this or do that? And then and I will say this, when it comes to you playing rogue, as a rogue player, you should understand what the top decks are and how to combat those top decks with what you want to play. Like that's all about that's what it is about being a rogue player, I should know. And Pokemon and in Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm a rogue player. Like it's all about how can I combat the meta with the deck down plan, and the side deck is going to help me because not only will I just cover, 2, 3 bases or 2, 3 decks out of the top five, I can side for the other two and possibly have a better matchup knowing they are inherently stronger and probably inherently faster than I am. So that's just my aspect of it. Like I think the side deck will actually help a lot of role players a lot more, then help the meta decks, just as much. Of course, the meta decks will still get better, but the role decks would then have the surprise factor that the meta decks now have to think and compensate for instead of just being the big boy on the block and having 1 or 2 people to go against you. Now you have to worry about 7 other decks, which actually balances every single thing. Because me and you said on this podcast many times and say, yo, Desmond is the second best deck of this format behind Gabu Bond. Gabu Bond won our nationals. It got first and second. But where was Jesmine? Like, it's one of those things to where, like, Jesmine had the representation, but where was it? Like, it didn't even make top 8 in our nationals. So it's one of those things to where if Jesmine had a side deck, we could have saw Jesmine in the top 8 instead of Agubon. And then you like, okay, that's when the side deck came into factor. But then that player had to be smart enough to know what to side, what not to side, how to side for certain matchups. And that's the aspect that I am in favor of having a side deck for.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, like I said, we're both coming in here. I mean, I don't as far as side decking, I don't really have too much more to put into it. As far as thoughts, I said what I said. I think that's what I think. The time thing, the time thing's got me a little scared. I'm gonna be completely honest. I need to see an announcement. I'm kind of just hoping that I'm just missing it, and I don't see it, and that they did announce it, and I'm just missing it. I mean, I kind of hope that's a thing, but if they did, I'm sure you all will let us know, and then we'll be able to see that. But if not, they need to announce that pretty quick. That's for sure.
Yeah, I want to see people's thoughts when it comes to this podcast because this is something that just may split the community. Like when it comes to like their opinions.
Oh, it's gonna. It already has. I'm more interested to see about when we get an official announcement after DigiFest and they get their whatever data they're probably looking for. I'm sure we can both agree though that they probably shouldn't coexist together though.
I think we both 100% agree that they should not coexist together.
Yeah, and that's. And the thing about side decking, so I don't like side decking, but I guess I'd rather have that over nothing, right? Mm-hmm. But out of the two, I'd prefer Mulligan. But I figured I'd say that. Like, if we don't get a Mulligan and we get a side deck, it's not going to be like, oh, well, the game's over and I quit. I only play what I think is the best deck anyway, so the reason why I don't like side decking, if it comes true, would only technically benefit me. So, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. I just think as far as a whole basis, I'd prefer the Mulligan.
Yeah, I think we can agree that no matter which one they keep, we're we're okay, but we
It's better
both
than
agree that
nothing. I would say it's
right.
better than. I mean, I don't know if I fully agree with the side deck being better than nothing, but I think if you have the side deck, at least that way, you like. I feel like decks would be a little bit more refined for main decks because they would be able to side deck into other stuff. So I don't know. I guess we'll see for sure whenever the DigiFest does happen. But I mean, you knew me and Dante were gonna have to hop on here and give our thoughts about it.
Of course, I just don't want to see older cards that are good not be played at all, and I think that's another key factor of we have what like almost 1,000 cards, if not more already. Like, let's give some of these older cards some good shine to where they can just
Ooh, shine.
flourish. Even then, like Shine would actually have a great time with a side deck.
Oh, Shine would love a side deck.
Exactly.
That goes back into just being able to side in whole thing. Security Control could side in the whole Beelstar package. Shine Greymon with the yellow package. You could literally side in the Lord Nightmon package if you wanted to, or something like that.
There you go. And every deck is going to have their pros and cons when it comes to synergy and not. Like, that's just how it is. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I probably want more. I probably want anything more than nothing. But yeah, both together is gonna be very very interesting. Because like going back into it, it's just like I play versus Diaboromon. I side in, so now I have 4 Rattlestar index. Oh, didn't hit any. Guess I'll just put these 5 to the bottom and I draw. And, oh, there it goes. Hit it, guaranteed. I already got five cards drawn to hit my side deck, plus all the draw I'm about to get from these mats.
Right.
So
Me.
together
I just
they're very dangerous together.
yeah, I just like chaos, but having both in the game, I think that's too much even for me. And
That's
I like chaos.
that's like not even chaos in the good way. That's just like that's like
Right.
chaotic evil. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right. This is not necessary, people.
Yeah,
One or the other, not both.
yeah. One of them's like they're both like an evil and like a good, but both together is just chaotic evil because it's just like it's like I feel like it's gonna be like that meme where the dog's sitting there and it's all on fire and he's like, this is fine. This is fine. My opponent just sided in a bunch of good cards and then they mulligans and then they hit all of them. This is fine. Everything's okay.
That's my life. That's my life.
Yeah. All right. Well, you got any final thoughts to wrap up?
I think this is probably a very impactful podcast, man.
I think this is. I mean, this is probably going to be the one where most people are going to want to give their opinions, and we are ready to see it. We'll be checking them out. So let us know what you think. I mean, just remember, these are just opinions. So we'd also like to hear your opinions. But if you're just going to yell at us, then don't. But
People are entitled to their own opinions, not their own facts.
yeah, we're just here on this podcast to talk about Digimon, talk about the news, talk about what's going on, give our thoughts, and then that way everybody could hear our thoughts, make their own decisions, see what it is. Nothing's set in stone. A lot of places I saw talking about testing this at their locals. I might be going to a locals tomorrow that is going to be testing out the Mulligan, but not the side deck, just because they agreed that it would be easier to announce that they're enacting the Mulligan instead of the side deck for people who are not aware and like show up without a side deck, you know. So we're gonna test out the Mulligan at that local just to see how it goes, and we could potentially talk about that next week, and then I'll probably try out side deck meta too, just to get some testing on that and see how it feels. But overall, I mean, I think we kind of I definitely got it all out there, said what I said. I think we both kind of went back and forth. There's definitely some stuff that we're both agreeing on. I think it's just that when it comes down to this, I think people are just gonna see beneficial natures from both, and you're just gonna have to gravitate towards which beneficial nature that you agree with. But I guess the one thing we've said that we think that they both can't exist together, but I'm kind of scared that if we get both and they do exist together. So we're definitely gonna have to see how DigiFest comes out. Well, that's not for quite some time, so we'll have some more podcasts in between then to talk about before we probably get back into seeing what our official announcement for this is. But let us all know what you think. But for now, this is going to be this episode. So I am Primitive.
I'm Dante.
And we will catch you all next time. Hope you all have a great week. Later.
Peace.